You cannot have liberty exist. You cannot have liberty coexist with the state. The state's very existence is antithetical to liberty, because at a minimum, let's take the minarchist example. You require the extortion of property in the form of taxation in order to fund whatever minimal projects there would be. Minimal law enforcement. Lawmakers need to have some sort of salary or wage or something. You would probably need some sort of court system that you would need to be funded. And honestly, a lot of people will retaliate to that and say, well, you could make taxation voluntary. The problem with that is that you can't guarantee, one, you couldn't guarantee adequate funding, in which case the state would collapse, or two, it would cause the other people in society to rebel against those that aren't paying, because they would be stealing from the collective, because they are reaping whatever benefits that the state would be providing without paying into it.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do, getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 131. I appreciate all the recent subscribers from the last episode. Make sure you check out the show sponsors, LMNT and Sledge, to get all jacked and tan and hydrated. Today, I got Derek Wills with me. We've been trying to make this happen for a little bit, and our schedule's finally worked out, so we could finally do it. Derek, how you doing, dude?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate the patience and accommodating my schedule. And then there's the I got banned on Twitter, so we had no way of communicating at that point. But I'm good, man, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, dude, of course. Well, you had, I believe, connected with me over through Twitter and told me to check out your book, and I did. And this was a while ago that I checked it out, but I thought it was very, very well put together. I don't know what the proper word I want to use. I keep wanting to say soliloquy, but I feel like that's the incorrect word. But I felt like it was a very, very good, beginner's guide to libertarianism, and maybe even beyond that. But it's like a really good brief. Like, you could hand this to somebody or give it to them via audiobook and say, hey, read this, and this is going to kind of give you a real good comprehensive guide of libertarianism. So I guess let's start with first things first. What encouraged you to write the Liberty Solution, right?
Yeah. So a few years back, I worked for a grassroots gun rights organization. I did a lot of lobbying, had a podcast, and a part of that is we would hold rallies, and I would give speeches. I gave a speech at a rally we had in Santa Fe, Texas, shortly after the tragedy there that happened. And I gave a speech on liberty and the right to bear arms, as was always the topic that I would talk about. And after my speech, one particular person came up to me and said, I really loved your speech. I feel like you should write a book. And I was like, you know what? I should write a book. That sounds like a great idea. And so the next day is whenever I started, opened up my Word doc and started writing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess it's a pretty brief dig right in there, but yeah, dude, that's really, really cool. And like I said, it seemed like a really good book that you could just hand to like your mom or dad or somebody like that just has no clue what libertarianism is, and then they can get a really, really good brief on it and probably come away agreeing with a lot of it. When you wrote the book, was that kind of your intended audience, or what did you have in mind when you first wrote it?
So yeah, I wanted to speak to somebody that might be on the fence with libertarianism, or even somebody that at least has an open mind about it. Might not be trending that way in any way, but wanted to hear that particular philosophy articulated. So that's kind of that was my focus throughout the book. My philosophy actually changed a lot. Whenever I started, I was a pretty hardcore libertarian party type person. I'm not that way anymore. I'm full on anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist. I don't believe in the legitimacy of the state in any way. And so I needed to make sure that I still captured that, and essentially to tell anybody that's either a minarchist, a libertarian, or even a conservative Republican, progressive, whomever, that, people who say that the state is illegitimate or say that taxation is theft, they shouldn't be instantly dismissed. They're what they bring to the table and the philosophy behind why anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, libertarianism, it is a legitimate discussion that we should all have. And that was really important to me, and I'm glad that it came through and translated to the reader and to the listener of the audiobook, because I really tried to make sure that it was focused in that type of way.
Nice, nice. So what was it like kind of getting it published? Because that always seems to be a little bit of a rabbit hole for most authors. I've kind of contemplated making an ebook on like fitness and doing tons of like deep dives on research and try to put that in a real digestible thing. So I can't even like imagine what it is like to actually write like a physical book and an audio book to kind of share that with people.
It's a pain in the ass. So I'm incredibly proud to say that Walter Block wrote the foreword to the book.
Okay, I'm glad you touched on that because I want to bring that up. Yeah.
And I actually asked him his advice on what to do. And he told me that whenever he first pitched Defending the Undefendables, he got rejected 500 times before it finally got picked up and published. Wow. And he said, keep on submitting. I got to about 200 rejections, and I got a little disheartened, to be honest, because I know that a lot of people that work in publishing and literary agents, they're not the type that would be open to this. It's a very niche type market. It's never going to be a New York Times bestseller, right? Yeah. And they're all in it to make money, as they should be. And as I'm venting my frustrations and networking as much as I can, I ended up meeting a gentleman who also lives in the state of Texas, like I do, who has worked in publishing, albeit he works in Christian publishing, for the past 20 years. And he and I talked about it, and he said, look, you might want to consider self-publishing. And here's why. He gave me a whole list of reasons. Namely, self-publishing through Amazon yields a much larger royalty, but also the fact that, yeah, literary agents and publishing houses, they can bring a lot to the table and help you market, but you're still going to end up having to do all that legwork. So because of how niche this book is, it would probably just be better to self-publish and market it myself. So I waited a little bit more, and I didn't want to ignore what Dr. Block had told me. But I ultimately came to the decision, that this is actually pretty sound advice. So I decided to self-publish after about 200 or so rejections. And Amazon actually makes it very easy to self-publish your work. So I know a lot of people have problems with Amazon and Jeff Bezos and what have you, but honestly, Kindle Direct Publishing is kind of a godsend for people like me, and anybody that wants to write a book. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If you just want to write your own memoirs and nobody knows who you are, that's fine. You can get published. And honestly, I have no regrets at this point.
Well, I think the point you're speaking to here is something that libertarians have been a little iffy on, especially over the last couple of years, where you always heard that it's a private company, bro, argument from people who would get kicked off Twitter and stuff like that. And I feel like Amazon kind of breaches into that ground as well, if you follow what I'm saying. Like, this is kind of like the new Walmart almost, right? This is almost like the new mall. So, um, I don't want to say it's necessarily not a private company, but it's definitely kind of blurred that line because of, the mix of, the corporate and the state, and having this kind of, thing available to you is kind of like having a public utility. And I actually don't say that in a pejorative way, because it's very, very useful. Like, people complain about Amazon, but the point I always make is like, I don't see anybody else saying we're going to have a pump pre-workout available to your house in 2 days, right? When you could start doing that, then, okay, you got a good product, right? So there is definitely a solid argument to make that Jeff Bezos has, fostered an incredible company. Now, whether that's all natural, that's definitely up for debate, obviously, but you can't really argue with the end of the day results.
What's going on, guys? We're going to take a quick break from the show to tell you about the show sponsors and the way that you can support me and this podcast. I'm sponsored by Axe and Sledge. Won't really focus in here, but right here in my hand, I have their The Grind, which is essential amino acids and hydration. Feel free to check it out. This is your mom's sweet peach. They have some awesome flavors and awesome names. They also have multivitamins, fat burners, creatine, beta-alanine, all sorts of different supplements to help you get all jacked and tan and help you become a person more full of liberty and health, as this show is about. So if you want to support me and support this podcast, then feel free to go to axandsledge.com and check out all their great supplements there, and use code Matovcik10. That's MATOVCIK 10 at checkout for a little discount, and to let them know I sent you their way. All right, everybody, thanks. Now back on to the show.
Absolutely. I mean, people can say what they will about Amazon. I have a Prime account, and my wife uses it regularly. And there's, if you can't find it on Amazon, do you really need it? So personally, I love being an Amazon shopper, and I don't have any qualms. I mean, Jeff Bezos isn't exactly the most pro-liberty person in the world, but honestly, if we based all of our market decisions off of somebody's politics, I don't think many of us would have too many options to choose from at that point. Some people don't want to go to Chick-fil-A because of their stance on gay rights. I don't agree with their position on gay rights, but I love their chicken sandwiches, so I'm going to continue eating them. I love me some Jesus chicken. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters. If they start engaging in unethical business practices outside of their personal beliefs, then that may be a different story. But for the most part, they run a good business. They have a great product. Amazon is the same way. And really, that's all the market demands.
Right. Yeah. And I completely agree. And this kind of goes to a point that actually I want to talk to you about today, since it is 2 days after 9/11. When it comes to unethical business practices, you think about arms sales in the military industrial complex. But before we kind of start diving down that rabbit hole, elaborate on your experience with the military, because you were in the military, if I remember correctly from your bio, 2006 to 2011, or was it 2011 to 2015? I know there were fives in there, I think.
It was 2005 to 2011.
Okay, so
yeah, you're really close. I'm sorry, repeat the question one more time.
Kind of elaborate on your experience with the military. And I guess I kind of want to add this to, I really appreciate this culture that the people who go into the military kind of have. And a lot of libertarians are reading right now. I can hear it already. But this idea of, wanting to be a disciplined person and working hard to make yourself better and to serve something greater than yourself is incredibly admirable. The only part where people get lost and where people like you and I would disagree is for what they're doing it for. But, you know, when you have this whole complex of public schools and this culture that tells people you're, you know, the greatest person in the world, you're a hero for going and doing this. It really takes that noble drive that a lot of people have and use it for nefarious purposes. So I guess kind of elaborate on what your military service and what kind of got you there and your thoughts, you know, from then to now.
Yeah. So it's, I was just like any other kid coming out of high school, you know, growing up in a conservative family. You know, my whole rationale behind joining was being a part of something bigger than yourself, serving your country, you know, the typical bullet points. And I started realizing that there were some things that just didn't add up, right? If I'm supposed to be defending American freedom, why am I out here defending an Iraqi company's oil platform? Started making me raise questions, and a lot of it was really disheartening. Yeah, there's a lot of camaraderie in the military, and rightfully so. I mean, you really do have to depend on these people to have your back whenever if you're ever engaged in any hostilities. And that's a big ask for people that you may or may not know all that well, you know? So you share that, but one thing that really doesn't get talked about a lot is the why. You know, we all just assume the same why. And we just kind of take it for granted. You know, service members are all fed the same propaganda as the American civilian is. And, you know, you get a lot of people that in the military right now that would love to go to fight in Ukraine, for instance. They don't really ask the questions, and it's because of the conditioning that we've all been forced through in public indoctrination camps known as public schools. You know, the propaganda machine on your favorite mainstream news channel. Whenever I mean, it's hard to break that because you're essentially having to admit that everything that you know is a lie. And that is not something that's easily done for even for me. Like, whenever I started coming to the realization that the military industrial complex is just a criminal racket, and we're sending people to die, putting them in harm's way, or to have them come home with a lifetime of mental scars that they're never going to be able to fully cope with. Also, you know, companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, BAE, whomever, can continue growing and profiting, and all the lawmakers that voted for the war, you know, their portfolios are growing. You know, it's sickening. It's a level of evil that I can't really put into words. And it's disheartening, and it really pisses me off to a level that I can't. That whole chapter was really rough for me to write because, you know, I've buried friends. I have seen them struggle with, you know, daily with night terrors and PTSD that doesn't get captured in the media or in movies the way that it should be. You know, people getting violent, you know, that never would have had they not been dealing with this, getting triggered by something so that seems so superfluous to the rest of us, and knowing that they're going to have to live like this for the rest of their lives, depending on how long that is, because, you know, a lot of them are killing themselves because they can't deal with it anymore. You know, when you think about that, and you think about that, this is all essentially done for a political chess match with nothing tied to quote unquote defending American liberty. It really is one of the most evil cons ever conceived.
Wow. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it was very, very jarring for me to learn about the
the significant evil that is the military industrial complex. And it was actually probably within the last 4 years that I really did. And I always consider myself a libertarian for probably the last 10 years or so. And then it wasn't until a little bit more recently that I really dug deep on the military stuff. And it really is just this sick, twisted machine that just chews people up and spits them out. And then on top of that, we go over to other countries and completely destroy these countries. The one situation that comes to mind that another veteran had came on my show and spoke about it, the population of Afghanistan had tripled in the last 20 years that we were there. And then we propped them up with all this, basically, hey, life is good. We're going to give you all this money. We're doing regime change. And then we pull the rug out from under them. And it's not to say that that rug should have ever been there in the first place, but it's just the fact that you see what the consequence of us meddling in another country's affairs are. And it just left that population decimated. So now you're going to have 2 generations of people that will never know the prosperity that their parents and some grandparents knew, all because, the weapons manufacturers wanted to keep the gravy train rolling, essentially.
Yeah. No, you're right. The military industrial complex it needs to be talked about more. And another side to the military industrial complex are the evils that the state does that the military doesn't take part in. Clandestine operations by the CIA, economic sanctions, which is nothing more than economic terrorism that is responsible for countless of innocent people getting killed or dying of famine or whatever the case may be. I highlight in the book that in the 90s, Madeleine Albright was asked about 500,000 children being, dying as a result of economic sanctions on Iraq, and being asked if that was worth it. And she goes, yes. You're talking 500,000 children, that had no skin in the game, that died as a result of U.S. foreign policy. And you're saying that the price is worth it. That's a level of evil I will never understand.
Right. I don't understand how people like that could really sleep at night, knowing that you literally just said, I am okay with 500,000 children dying. Something that I've been waving my hands a lot about recently has been this new Cold War between, America, Russia, and China. And it's sincerely surprising to me how strong the propaganda is from both sides about these countries and all the lies. And it doesn't take a lot of digging to find out how much we're being lied to. And then just to see the effect that it has on people, where you have people in our, State Department, Marco Rubio, who's running for Congress down in Florida, saying we should blow up Chinese warships, and then we sanction these other countries. And then you have the president saying we're going to keep sending, weapons to all these other countries. All right. Sorry about that, guys. And we were just kind of hitting on the Cold War with China stuff. It's been something I've been kind of waving my hands a lot with, but it kind of goes to the larger point we've been talking about with the military industrial complex, that there's a lot of propaganda out there, and even people who are normally skeptical of government are falling for it now in 2022. And it's really sad, because this could be kind of a doozy when you have 2 nuclear armed countries that we're flirting and doing these proxy wars with almost. So, what are your thoughts surrounding some of that going on as of late?
China is a tyrannical shithole, and America is a tyrannical shithole to a lesser degree. And when authoritarians don't like each other, they will play a game of nuclear chicken as much as they can. I don't think anything will actually come of it. Just the absolute consequences of anything coming out of that would be so detrimental that anybody with half a brain can see that this is not a good idea to engage in. So it's probably far more for political theater and political capital than anything else. It's like whenever Trump was talking about Kim Jong-un and his nuclear program during his...
I've got a bigger button.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the same. It's all reality TV. Of course, now they're playing with real people's lives, and but I don't think anything will come of it. I think it's just, statists being statists and saying, I got a bigger stick than you do.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. Well, pivoting on to something else that I also wanted to get your opinion on. And I'm interested to have a little back and forth with you about this, the abortion issue. So kind of lay out your thoughts on the abortion issue and where you've fallen on it. And like I said, I'm kind of curious to bounce some ideas off you and see kind of where we end up.
Yeah, so this was actually one of there's a handful of topics in the book that I talk about where I changed position on. Abortion is one of them. I have, I grew up until even halfway through writing the book. I considered myself very, very pro-life, politically, philosophically, personally. And I still think that abortion for the reasons of birth control is immoral. I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but there is a property right associated with it. And that property right is the pregnant individual's own body. Now, a lot of pro-choicers get a lot of flack, and kind of rightfully so, in their messaging, my body, my choice, because it's not articulated properly. It is the sentiment behind what I explain in the book, but I actually elaborate on it. Yes, I believe that life begins at conception. Yes, I think that life, any individual's life, whether they are in utero or born, they are entitled to the same natural rights of life, liberty, and property as we all are. And this seems to fly in the face of the rest of what I'm about to say, in that abortion is also a natural right. And the reason is because whenever a pregnant individual is pregnant, that was redundant, but anyway, point. whenever somebody is pregnant, they still have full body autonomy. And yes, they have a separate life contained within them. But because they are the property owner of their uterus, of their own body, they have the ultimate say in whether or not it should remain. And because there is no means by which an abortion can be taken and can be undertaken that does not end the fetus's life, there is no other means by which you can do that. So that's the only way. It still retains its status as a natural right. And I equate it to this. If you had a family member that was ill, and it is a matter of fact that you are the only person on the face of the earth that can properly care for this individual, if you choose to bring them in and give them care, what the pro-life argument is that now you should be compelled to until they are able to take care of themselves. And if you don't, then the state should be able to come in and invoke violence against you in order to coerce you into doing that. It's the same thing with a pregnant individual. Yes, they made the choice to have sex with somebody and knowing that they could have ended up pregnant. Yes, they did end up pregnant, and that was a choice, but that is not the choice that they made. The choice that they made was to have sex with somebody. The consequences of that choice, they still have the choice to change their mind. That is another aspect of that, is to say that, well, if somebody consents to sex right before and then in the middle they change their mind, that, oh, nope, they already consented, they made the choice, so we're going to continue to have sex. That's rape. Because of the coercive factor, you cannot argue that abortion is not a natural right, because what a pro-life individual would be doing is saying that if you do not carry this pregnancy to term, then we are going to come in and invoke violence against you, and up to and including taking your life in order to ensure that you carry this pregnancy to term. That denies the property ownership of their own body, that denies body autonomy, yes, it could theoretically protect the unborn child's life. But with the inherent threat of violence attached to it, it's kind of hypocritical and it's on its face. There are cultural ways to do this without the state in a stateless society. But that's entirely up to the culture. You can't force culture to believe that it is acceptable, or you cannot force a culture to change overnight. So if they culturally believe that that an abortion up to 20, 25 weeks gestation is acceptable, then it's not anybody else's place, no matter how adamantly they disagree with it, to say you're wrong, and so now I'm going to invoke violence against you. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know I kind of bounced around on a few different examples, but you said that you wanted to kind of bounce some things off. So let's hear it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure you kind of felt like you got your full thoughts out before I kind of say anything to it. And I like that you brought it back to the choice, but where I would give you pushback is that I would almost look at this as a contract, as you understand foregoing sex, that the consequence is having a child. I mean, this is what that specific action is for that. When you look at it at the end of the day, no matter what, that's what we're physically wired for. So when you voluntarily consent to have sex, then you therefore understand the consequences. Just as the same way as if you were to operate a vehicle intoxicated, you understand the potential downsides and costs of that being you could kill somebody because you chose an action that's going to result in a certain consequence. So by your action of having sex, then you accept the consequences and the risks that therefore come with that, which would be that you get pregnant. And I don't think that you have the right to end that life because you therefore took the decision. You voluntarily made the decision to have sex and assume the risk of becoming pregnant. Therefore, that doesn't give you the right to kill the fetus. And I don't want, like, this isn't meant to be a hot debate, and it's not like I'm going to sit here and railroad you over it, but I just kind of want to see what your response to that would be, because I haven't talked to too many libertarians who are pro-choice that were able to give me pushback that I felt was reasonable, like that I would say, okay, well, that's a good point.
Okay, so you said you make the choice to knowing the consequences. Does it change your mind if they made the choice intending to get pregnant, got pregnant, and then changed their mind after? Does that change the variables in any way?
Personally, for me, no, because you understood that risk going in, and that, once again, if life is to begin a conception, then that life, you accepted the fact that you're creating this life now, so therefore it is immoral to end it. Now, the part where I get uncomfortable with this is that, okay, well, what do you do with this in a stateless society? Because you can't have, it's like, what do the ramifications look like? So right. I know that's kind of going beyond your question, but yeah, basically in my mind, no, I don't think changing your mind afterwards would mean that you could end that life. And that's just my opinion on that.
Right. And I was actually going to follow up and with that very sentiment. What are going to be your personal means of ensuring that somebody carries it to term? Because if it's just you in a stateless society, and the cultural belief is that an abortion is acceptable up to a certain period that you personally disagree with, to what end are you going to, I guess, try and stop the abortion from taking place?
Right. And that's kind of where the line runs out. It's like, well, in all actuality, I wouldn't be able to stop anybody without violating some other form of aggression, because this is somebody else's choice. I do not agree with that choice. I think you're murdering somebody, but it's like, okay, well, how do you stop a murder of a fetus that's inside a woman without potentially killing that woman? Once again, I don't have an answer. Yeah. This isn't something that I like.
And honestly, I think that we have more in common with this particular topic than we don't. Okay. You know, like I said, I do believe life begins at conception, and I do think that life is entitled to the same natural rights as everybody else is. But I also kind of recognize the fact that there is no way to prevent a woman or a pregnant individual from undergoing an abortion in a stateless society. And honestly, because it ultimately is, I will maintain that it is their right to do, because it is their own body. And, you know, if they welcome somebody into their home to care for them, and then change their mind, even though that changing their mind would factually result in that person dying, they still have the right to make that choice. And the same applies to an unborn fetus as well. And because I draw that corollary between the two, ultimately, I don't pass any judgment on any pregnant individual that gets an abortion, because ultimately it's not my decision to make. It's theirs. It's between them, and it's ultimately between them and if they believe in God or not. It's between them and their partner, if their partner is in the picture. But it's ultimately their choice to make. I can't cast judgment on it. I can disagree with it all I want. And that's kind of where this entire country has gone backwards, is that we can disagree on what you do, but instead of saying I'll defend him to the death, you're right to do it, it's I disagree with what you do, and I'm going to make the state and force you to change your ways, or else they're going to murder you. Right. You know, and that's ultimately the crux of any topic, no matter what it is. If your disagreement takes you to the level where you're going to allow the state or some other entity to invoke violence on somebody, well, then you're not a pro-liberty person, no matter what your opinions are. So that's kind of how I would retaliate with that. Is that satisfactory? Or
yeah, no, I totally think that's reasonable. And like I said, this is kind of a sticky area where I don't like where it comes down to kind of where it leads. It's the same deal with like when it comes to the rape exception. In my mind, I think that's okay because you didn't voluntarily take that action, but it can't be something that you change your mind on. It's, hey, let's as soon as possible because I did not consent to this. But, you know, if now you've enabled this for, you know, to the point where 8 months or so down the line, then at that point, it's like, okay, well, you've had all this time to, you know, as much as I hate to say it, kill the baby that you did not choose to, you know, get. I just, you know, you're causing undue suffering, because it's definitely going to suffer a lot more at that point than at a little bit of an earlier point. And like I said, this isn't something that I like to say. It's not something I'm necessarily comfortable with, but in my mind, that's where it is. And then when it comes to, you know, non-viable pregnancies, if it's the mother or the fetus, then in my mind, the mother's life takes agency because she's already, you know, a sentient being. So that's kind of where I fall on that.
All right, guys. I am absolutely thrilled with the show's new sponsor. I am now sponsored and have an affiliate through LMNT electrolytes. I have used these electrolytes for years. Back when I used to do a lot of fasting, in fact, I used to drink, sometimes I want to say up to 7 a day, 7 little packets. So the packets are full of all the electrolytes that you need to perform and hydrate yourself properly. You need sodium for pretty much every single function in your body, despite what a lot of people may tell you. Sodium doesn't actually cause a lot of the issues that people kind of would have you believe. So just real quick to give you a little bit of facts. You don't need sugar to hydrate. Electrolytes and water don't require glucose to pass through the gut. The average American consumes over 60 pounds of sugar a year. And when it comes to athletic performance, you can actually lose up to 7 grams per day in hot climate. So make sure you click on the affiliate link below to get all your hydration needs. And like I said, I'm super stoked to have these guys teamed up with the podcast, and just make sure you get your electrolytes through LMNT. All right, guys, thanks.
Is there anything else you want to touch on with the abortion issue? Because I had something I wanted to pivot to.
No, by all means, let's pivot away.
So I actually like that you brought up the cultural value of this too, because I think this is where we need to go to advance this, and it's very, very important. So I feel like abortion largely is a cultural issue because we've taught people to not understand that the consequence of having sex is having a child. And that goes for a lot of things as well. Like even when it comes to like interest rates and stuff like that, where people don't understand that interest rates are information, right? It's basically data telling people what the value of money is at a certain time. So we've really eliminated a lot of cultural enforcement and, basically took away a lot of socially conservative values, which I view as a generally good thing from people, which now kind of makes it a little bit harder for them to tolerate the responsibility that inherently comes with freedom. Now, that's just kind of the way I look at it, but I'm curious what your kind of thoughts around culture and some of the stuff I just laid out are.
Well, I mean, a culture is basically it's what we all strive to develop, right? I don't like I used to, but I don't like the phrase "we the people" because it's a collectivist identity, right? We're Americans, I'm a Texan, whatever the case may be. It's all this collectivist identity. What they're really striving for is a cultural identity, which is different from a collectivist identity. A collectivist identity requires essentially the sacrifice of, your own aspirations for the benefit of the greater good. A culture doesn't necessarily have to have that aspect. It can, certainly, but it doesn't have to. And that's what differentiates a collectivist and a cultural identity. In a culture that where like-minded individuals essentially create non-binding quote unquote laws or guidelines, they have the power to really drive the society that they want. And this could be an anarcho-capitalist society. It could even function as an anarcho-communist society, provided you don't piss people off by taking their stuff. But the power that a culture has really is the keystone to any real philosophy. And if the culture is tailored to allowing or to focusing individualism and liberty, which a lot of Americans proclaim but isn't actually accurate. But if it actually was, that society would be insanely awesome. I don't know how else to describe it, because the culture is a collectivist sort of definition, but with the individual taking priority. And there that sort of thing, it would be unheard of if it were to come to fruition, because nobody has ever been able to successfully achieve it because they want to achieve it through coercive measures, as we see everywhere else. So I think the power that a culture can have is infinite, honestly.
Right. Yeah. And I totally think that's true. And that's why, personally, for me, I've tried to encourage health and fitness to other libertarians, because in my mind, the way that this plays out is that you need very, very influential people to speak about libertarian issues, right? When you're an influential person, a lot of people are going to listen to you and they're going to buy into your ideas through the fact that you have relationship capital with these people because you've influenced them in some way. So as you become a more influential and important person to people, then that message spreads. These people believe that message. And it's kind of like the butterfly effect, right? If we're influential people, we're doing things, we're engaging in culture, then eventually more and more people are going to desire a culture of liberty and freedom, which I think is more important than trying to have this top-down approach of where we get somebody in the White House and then they install liberty with an iron fist, which could that happen? Maybe, but is that sustainable? No. In my mind, you need the cultural, you need the cultural backing to it, and you need a populace that accepts liberty and freedom as their highest values.
Absolutely. It really, a culture is a natural evolution, and anything else is artificial. And whenever you try to artificially create liberty, it's not good. Whenever you try to artificially, instill values in people, they don't take hold. Culturally speaking, they have a lot better chance of taking hold and your ideals coming to fruition than in any other way. And you can't force it. you can't force somebody to have a moral compass. You can't force somebody to believe in God or not believe in God. You can't force anybody to, you really can't force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. They might comply, but that doesn't mean that they accept it. You know, if I put a gun to somebody's head and say, you're going to convert to X religion, well, they might say, sure. They might follow all of the tenets of that particular religion and on the outside, but inside they're like, I hate this and I'm being forced to do it. So it's not it's actually no way to live. You can't expect a good quality of life if you're trying to force cultural views on somebody.
Yeah, I agree completely. So we've been shooting the shit now for a little bit. I kind of want to get a few more things off you, and then we'll call it a wrap. What is the way forward? And I know that's such a loaded question, but what do you see as the way to move forward towards this culture that we're kind of talking about?
I don't. That is a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to. Just what we were talking about. I would love to force everybody to understand my point of view and take that as this is the definitive philosophy that we should all follow starting today. But I know that I can't do that. I think that in order to genuinely achieve that, it's going to take a lot of bad things in the world happening. It's going to take some sort of global economic collapse. It's going to cost the lives of hundreds of millions, if not north of 1 billion people. You're going to have people starving. You're going to have famine. But ultimately, it's going to have to be what many would consider the Great Reset to take place. And in that, you could see liberty-minded people flocking together and creating this society where they champion the individual over the collective. I think that would be what it would take, because I think that if they tried it any other way, and don't get me wrong, I love the Free State Project and what they're doing. But I think that the state will not allow for a peaceful divorce or a peaceful secession. History has shown that they do not. And if it were tried, I think that there would be a lot of bloodshed as well, and ultimately it would come down to who has more guns. And unfortunately, I believe that would be the state. And because of the brainwashing and propaganda that takes place, they would all believe that they're doing it for the greater good, even though everything that they're doing is antithetical to liberty.
Wow. Jeez, we'll end on an up note. Jeez, man, that was rough. Yeah,
sorry.
I don't entirely disagree, though. I was quote tweeting a certain libertarian today where they were complaining about the Iran nuclear deal, and I could tell they've been repeatedly bad on this issue, and I could tell they have no idea what they're talking about. And they were also complaining about the raising of interest rates. And once again, when you're a libertarian and you understand Austrian economics, you know that interest rates in a higher debt environment are a good thing, because it encourages people to save rather than spend their money. It was astonishing me that this person has almost 200,000 followers on Twitter, and they wouldn't know their ass from a hole in the ground, apparently. So what does liberty look like to you, Derek?
Liberty exists in a space where the state does not. You cannot have liberty exist. You cannot have liberty coexist with the state. The state's very existence is antithetical to liberty, because at a minimum, let's take the minarchist example. You require the extortion of property in the form of taxation in order to fund whatever minimal projects there would be, minimal law enforcement. Lawmakers need to have some sort of, salary or wage or something. You would probably need some sort of court system that you would need to be funded. And honestly, a lot of people will retaliate to that and say, well, you could make taxation voluntary. The problem with that is that you can't guarantee, one, you couldn't guarantee adequate funding, in which case the state would collapse, or two, it would cause the other people in society to rebel against those that aren't paying, because they would be stealing from the collective, because they are reaping whatever benefits that the state would be providing without paying into it. And so at that point, if you're going to make taxation voluntary, just make everything a private entity, and volunteer your funds to whatever business you want. You can't ultimately. There is no state that could ever exist. The U.S. in 1787 was still a statist society. It did not contain liberty. Did it have an insanely amount more liberty compared to today? Absolutely. But it didn't contain liberty, because people were still having products that they were importing being taxed. And if they didn't pay the tax, then they were facing violence from the state. That's no way to live. That if anybody else were to do that, we would call that organized crime. And we would say that is highly illegal, and what you're doing is immoral and wrong, and we're going to put you in a jail cell for the rest of your life. But when the state does it, I guess it's okay. So.
Right. Yeah, I got you. What does health look like to you?
Health?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Not me. I'm working on it, but I'm let's see. Health. Probably Zac Efron and his 10 abs. I don't understand that.
Nice.
I don't know how else to answer that, to be completely honest.
Oh, you know, I just ask that to every single guest just to kind of see where their mind goes with it. But yeah, dude, I really enjoyed this chat. Where can everybody find you? Check out your book and everything else.
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Gentlemen for Liberty. You can find me on Twitter at Gents with a Z, because my primary account got banned. Gents, the number 4 Liberty. And I'm on Instagram at Gentlemen for Liberty. I do have a podcast, but we're kind of on a hiatus at the moment just because schedules are insane, and I don't have the time to dedicate to it that I would like, but hopefully we can get that going at some point, which is really sad because the last episode we did, I entitled "We're Back" and talking about how I'm glad that we're back and we're going to make this a regular thing. And then I proceeded to not make it a regular thing. So there's that, but you can find the 20 something episodes that we got on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the usual platforms. And probably I'm most active on Twitter. And I would really like to get my 2,000 followers back that they denied me. You can get the Liberty Solution on Amazon. Just type it in. You'll see that there's a foreword by Walter Block, and I would very much appreciate it. You can also get the audiobook on Audible as well.
Nice. Well, I definitely recommend everybody go check that out. I definitely enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really, really great book. And as I've kind of laid out throughout this podcast, and hopefully Derek did satisfactorily for everyone else, I know he did for me, make his case for the Liberty Solution and as to why you should go pick it up. And like I said, I definitely recommend everybody picking it up. And especially if you're not a libertarian right now, maybe this book might push you over the edge. So Derek, if y'all got anything else, we'll close her out.
No, that's it, man. I appreciate you having me very much.
Of course. All right, everybody. Until next time, take care.